And the Israeli military, alongside all of that, continues to launch airstrikes in the Gaza Strip on what they describe as Islamic Jihad military targets. The Palestinian Health Ministry says 24 people are dead there. That number includes the Islamic Jihad commander targeted and at least a dozen other militants. Well, joining us right here in the studio is Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. He's the Israeli military's foreign media spokesperson. Thank you so much for being here, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just talk for a moment about where things stand at the moment, because there's, as there always is at this point, rumors of an Islamic Jihad, a senior official going to Egypt for consultations, Hamas as well. Talk about a ceasefire from the Israeli military's perspective. Where are you in this escalation?
We are at the stage where we achieved very early on what we set out to achieve, which was the elimination of a very bad terrorist. He was killed with minimal collateral damage. Since then, we have been very clear in our aim, which has been to limit the escalation and to persuade the PIJ, the Islamic Jihad, that escalating the situation isn't in their best interest. As you said before, there's been quite massive fire from Gaza towards Israel. Much of it has been intercepted by the Iron Dome, which currently is at 90% interception rate, which are amazing figures, and we hope that those remain the same. But at the end of the day, the question here remains how much the Islamic Jihad will try to escalate the situation. The message from us has been that, and it's been not only in words, but really in actions, as you alluded to, in the amount of dead terrorists. If you'll try to continue fire at Israeli civilians, there will be a price to pay.
I just want to briefly follow up on that. Do you know how many, does the Israeli military have a number on how many of those 24 Palestinians killed are actually members of Islamic Jihad, and how many might be civilians?
Yeah, we just issued a few minutes ago that we have, based on our intelligence, based on names that we collected after they were killed, 20 of those 24 reported, according to our intelligence, were combatants, terrorists, that were either busy planning to fire rockets towards Israel, or anti-tank missiles. We even were able to detect and kill one such crew just before they were able to launch a missile from the northeastern part of the Gaza Strip towards Israel. You remember perhaps last time in May when we had a similar such attack from the northeastern part of Gaza. It hit a vehicle and an Israeli civilian was killed in his private vehicle standing on the road. So that's definitely something that we put a lot of emphasis in spotting and then thwarting in real time. And we're happy with the fact that we've been able to detect these hostile activities, rocket launchings and missile launchings, and have been able to thwart them in real time, which is key. And I might add that we've done it so far with a very minimal amount of collateral damage or non-combatants being involved in the fighting.
Jonathan, because of the political situation in Israel, there have been a lot of questions raised about the timing of the targeted killing of Abu al-Ata. Now, that is not the military's concern, but there was a decision made to return, even at least for the moment, to this policy of targeted killing, which it seems not to, which at least the security establishment seems to have moved on from. Questions whether it was worth it when it was known there would be this strong response. Why in this case, and not others, was it justified now?
He's not the first terrorist to find his death at the hands of the IDF, and without going into current Israeli politics and versions, etc., which we in the military are less focused on, the bottom line is that Baha Abu al-Ata was a troublemaker. He was a terrorist with lots of Israeli blood on his hands, and his time had come. We were fair enough to give him a warning, quite a few warnings before this elimination, and we actually...
Could you clarify that?
Gladly. We issued a few warnings, some of them very direct and some of them indirect through other channels, with the purpose of letting him understand, him and his superiors.
Was that the reason you raised his profile in the media in recent weeks, in fact, to sort of give him that warning?
I can say that he definitely, we think, he understood that he was a person of interest because he acted as a wanted man. He constantly moved with a convoy of what we call human shields, civilians, that he hoped would save him from being targeted. And at the end of the day, we tried to persuade through different channels his superiors and him from continuing planning attacks, and before that from the attacks that he had already executed. Almost all of the attacks coming from Gaza over the last half year had his fingerprints on them.
Jonathan, I'm sure you know better than anyone that for every commander, every militant, every terrorist that is killed, there is another one and maybe another 10, 15 ready to step in. And I'm sure that the Israeli military has its eye on several of those, both in Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. So if he's fair game, I mean, who else is? Is Israel returning more broadly to a policy where targeted assassination is a clear option?
Well, I don't think it's wise to signal that
well,
here.
You did in the case of this commander, so maybe it is.
Also because that was part of a more broad picture where we wanted to establish stability, and we saw Al-Ata as somebody who was disrupting the situation and constantly kept on firing and threatening Israeli civilians. So the general picture is that, yes, there are lots of terrorists around us, not only in Gaza, but in Lebanon, in Syria, and in other places as well. And the Israeli intelligence does indeed spend a lot of efforts in compiling, classifying, analyzing, and translating that intelligence into something that can be used for targeting. And that doesn't mean that policy has changed, and it doesn't mean anything else than that. It means that we are ready to deal with terrorists wherever they are. Which I think is, after all, what the IDF is supposed to do.
Jonathan, I want to ask about this decision by the Home Front Command to keep schools closed and advise people to stay home in the Tel Aviv area. Something we've not seen since 1991. There has been some criticism that it is an overreaction, and that it also, in a sense, gives a victory to Islamic Jihad, who showing that they are able to disrupt life here in the center of the country. I mean, how much thought was given into that particular decision?
I can assure you that a lot of thought was given into the decision. It's based on the values that we all share, how dear life is to all of us. That decision made by the highest echelons in the IDF was based on intelligence and based on the assessment of what type of response we anticipated after the successful killing of Al-Ata. And I, for one, prefer to be on the safe side in terms of overestimating enemy capabilities. Of course, not exaggerating, but having a safe, sound estimate of their capabilities and making sure that our civilians are safe. I just add one word. The fact that so few, relatively few, Israeli civilians have been affected or injured by this massive barrage of rockets is thanks to the Iron Dome, but also thanks to the fact that Israeli civilians have heeded to warnings.
Right. We don't have long, so I want to ask you on the flip side, what is the Israeli military doing to avoid civilian casualties in Gaza?
A lot, actually. You spoke about the intel before that we analyze and accumulate of the different terrorists. You can see that the actions that we've taken against rocket launchers and against missile launchers have been very specific, very accurate, and almost surgical. And you haven't seen us bombing areas where there was a high risk of collateral damage. So again, we're always judged by the facts and by the actual outcome of what we do. The outcome here, the numbers show that the overwhelming majority of people killed in Gaza are, in fact, terrorists and combatants.
All right, Jonathan Conricus, thanks very much for being here with us. We're continuing this live extended coverage with our correspondents in the field. That's coming up next. Don't go anywhere.